Imagine this. You're strapped into the cockpit of a Messerschmitt Bf 109, the pride of the German Luftwaffe. Ahead of you is a narrow runway. The engine roars, the plane rattles, sweat runs down your face. You know one thing: a tiny mistake, a wheel sliding into the grass, and you're dead before you even see the enemy. For countless pilots, this was reality. It wasn't always combat that decided their fate, but takeoff, landing, or sheer exhaustion. In this video, we'll explore why the Bf 109, one of the most famous fighter planes of World War II, killed so many of its own pilots. We'll uncover its hidden technical flaws, the crushing burden placed on the men in the cockpit, and the organizational mistakes that doomed thousands. And we'll ask, was it really the enemy that destroyed these pilots, or did the true danger already sit in the machine itself? When the Bf 109 was developed in the mid-1930s, it was hailed as a technological masterpiece. Fast, agile, with an incredible climb rate, it dominated the skies of Europe in the early war years. But its sleek silhouette hid a dangerous truth. For its pilots, the aircraft was often as much a death trap as it was a weapon. It wasn't that the Bf 109 was weak in combat. On the contrary, it could hold its own against nearly any opponent for years, but its design was uncompromising. Built for performance, not safety. Many men died before they ever even had the chance to face the enemy. The greatest danger lurked on the ground. The Bf 109's landing gear was narrow and fragile, mounted close to the fuselage at an awkward angle. On takeoff or landing, the plane was prone to veer out of control. Even veteran pilots had to fight the aircraft every time. One pothole, one gust of crosswind, and the plane could flip, killing the pilot instantly. Visibility was another killer. The long nose blocked the forward view, forcing pilots to zigzag across the runway just to see ahead. On landing approach, obstacles or other planes often appeared only at the very last moment. Many young pilots were killed in collisions or crashes without ever meeting the enemy. Then came the fuel problem. During the Battle of Britain, the Bf 109 could only remain over England for about 15 minutes of combat before fuel ran low. To stay too long in a dogfight, and the return trip across the Channel was impossible, hundreds of planes were lost this way. Not to bullets, but to empty fuel tanks. One British pilot recalled, "We didn't always need to shoot them down. Sometimes we just watched the Messerschmitts run out of fuel and drop into the sea." Statistics tell the story. Roughly 10% of all Bf 109 losses weren't from enemy fire, but from accidents. And that's only the official figure. The real number was likely far higher. As the war dragged on, German pilot training deteriorated dramatically. In 1939, recruits could still log hundreds of flight hours. By 1944, many trainees were sent into combat with barely a fraction of that. Some never survived their first takeoff. Others crashed on training flights, unable to handle the tricky Bf 109. The aircraft forgave no mistakes, and mistakes were inevitable with undertrained, exhausted recruits. One veteran later wrote, "Most of us had no chance to gain experience. If you survived your first 10 missions, maybe you had a future. But many never even made it to their 11th. But it wasn't just machines and training that killed. The pilots' minds often broke before their bodies did. During the Battle of Britain, a phenomenon spread among Luftwaffe pilots called Channel sickness. Imagine flying over the English Channel, nothing but grey water below, the enemy coast ahead, and fuel gauges already running low. Every sortie meant only minutes of fighting, and the terrifying risk of drowning on the way home. Pilots suffered panic attacks, stomach cramps, even paralysis in the cockpit. These weren't signs of cowardice, but of relentless stress. Unlike the RAF, which rotated its pilots out of combat regularly. The Luftwaffe kept its men flying day after day, week after week. Rest was rare. If you weren't killed in battle, you might collapse from exhaustion instead. The Luftwaffe's system itself was broken. Germany lacked the reserves of trained pilots to replace losses. Veterans were kept at the front until they were killed, instead of being sent back to train new recruits. The result was a vicious cycle. The elite fought until they were gone, leaving the inexperienced to face combat unprepared. This reached disaster in January 1945 during Operation Bodenplatte. Hundreds of Bf 109s and FW 190s launched a surprise attack on Allied airfields. But many of the pilots were barely trained. The Allies were ready, and the Luftwaffe lost over 200 planes in a single day. Some pilots flew their very first combat mission and were dead within minutes. By 1943, the situation was desperate. Allied bombers pounded German cities daily. Bf 109 pilots often faced overwhelming odds. Dozens of fighters against hundreds of enemy planes. Fuel shortages made things worse. In the last year of the war, training hours were cut drastically. Some pilots entered combat with fewer than 100 hours of flight time. By contrast, British and American pilots often had 2 to 3 times as much training. A German pilot summed it up bitterly. "We were flying against a flood. For every Messerschmitt we sent up, they sent 5 Mustangs. It was only a matter of time before none of us came back." On top of it all came propaganda. German aces were celebrated as national heroes, with kill counts in the hundreds. But the Luftwaffe's victory confirmation system was deeply flawed. Many claims were exaggerated, sometimes double-counted. For ordinary pilots, the pressure to become an ace was enormous. Those without victories were seen as weak. Many took reckless risks just to score a kill and paid for it with their lives. Instead of fighting to survive, they were chasing a myth created by Nazi propaganda. The Bf 109 was a technological marvel, but also a death trap for its own men. Pilots died in landing accidents, from poor visibility, from empty fuel tanks, from inadequate training, from exhaustion, and from propaganda-fueled recklessness. Often it wasn't Spitfires or Mustangs that killed them, but the sum of design flaws, organizational failure, and human overstrain. In the end, the story of the Bf 109 is the tragedy of the air war itself. Even the most advanced machine can't protect its pilots when the system behind it is broken.